Hello, and welcome to Recent Ramble, the spin-off show that nobody asked for. I'm Charlie McGee.
I'm George McGee.
And as we did last time, this show is dedicated to films that are coming out round about now. Normally, George and I cover the films of our youth, the films of the 80s and the 90s. But we're doing this show. Why are we doing the recent one again, George? Remind me.
We thought that some people might be interested to hear our thoughts on more recent films, as well as banging on about the films of our youth in our standard show, Retro Ramble.
Yes, and this time we're going to be taking a look at the latest Star Wars spin-off, Solo, A Star Wars Story. So we will talk about, how we felt before we saw the film, what we think since, and obviously how it's been received. And we'll then go on and have a look at Deadpool 2. And then we'll finish up, as this one, it's not going to be as long as our normal Retro Ramble episodes. This is going to be,
bite-sized.
I would say, bite-sized. So films coming out later on over the summer. So, George, before we start, do you want to give people a quick lowdown of what to expect?
Yes, we are not film journalists, but we are just two guys that love talking about films. In this particular episode of Recent Ramble, because they are new releases, we will be avoiding going into spoiler territory. So we will talk around it where possible. Occasionally, we might throw in some bad impressions. I'm not sure if there will be on this episode. But ultimately, we aim to entertain and start. Feel free to join in on the conversation with us online on Facebook or on Twitter.
Yeah, and we're on Instagram. You can listen to our regular show, which is dedicated to 80s and 90s blockbuster classics that George and I grew up on. But without further ado, let's hit it.
I'm a driver. And I'm a flyer. I waited a long time for a shot like this.
What do you think? Well, what do you know?
So, Solo, A Star Wars Story. Well, just to give you a quick rundown, as I'm sure you've probably heard, it was decided to do a origin story based on the Han Solo character from the original Star Wars. It covers how he meets Chewbacca, all the things you wanted to know. How did he get the Falcon? What the hell is the Kessel Run about? This isn't the first Star Wars spin-off story, though, is it, George?
No, so we had, from a couple of years ago, we had Rogue One, which was set just before the original trilogy and which was all about the stealing of the Death Star plans. So this is the second entry, but actually before people complain about how Disney are milking the Star Wars franchise / ruining their childhood, the Han Solo spin-off in particular was suggested by George Lucas. So even before he sold to Disney, he was considering, he'd wrote a treatment for a potential new trilogy that the episodes 7, 8, and 9. But he also suggested some topics for potential spin-offs, Han Solo being one of them, and potentially Boba Fett or Obi-Wan Kenobi being some other suggestions as well.
Yeah, but I think it's quite a different tone. And as George is going to go into, there have been some quite well publicized issues in the production. But I'd say even I've gone through my own character arc with this film, from being disgusted at the idea of them making it to believing, as we mentioned in our last Recent Ramble episode, that I actually think it's going to do better than people think. So that shows how much I know. So I've gone from that to actually watching the film and feeling a very different way. But before we go into that, George, do you want to give us a quick rundown on some of the production challenges that were faced?
Yeah, so as you say, it's been quite well publicized. So Rogue One, the first Star Wars story, that's a bit of a tongue twister, spin-off, that it had some production problems of its own. There was reshoots. I think they reshot the sort of the last third of the film. There was a new director came in, so Tony Gilroy took over from original director Gareth Edwards, but Gareth Edwards' name is on the final film. And I think, despite those issues of Rogue One, it turned out to be a very successful film, and a lot of people enjoyed it. So with Solo, it was originally going to be directed by Chris Lord and Lord and Miller. So I think it's Chris Lord and Chris Miller who did originally did the Jump Street films. They also did the Lego Movie. So they're more comedy based writers, but they are, in the words of Mugatu, so hot right now, and their names were linked to a lot of projects. So they were brought on board. They'd filmed for 4 months before they were effectively sacked. They left that classic over creative differences. Star Wars head, Lucasfilm head, Kathleen Kennedy brought in a new director known as a safe pair of hands, Mr. Ron Howard. So Ron Howard is, he's Richie Cunningham from Happy Days. So he was an actor in his youth, but he's brought us many a big film over the years. I'm just
Apollo
trying to
13.
think of some of them. Yeah, Apollo 13, Backdraft. He more recently did Rush, the F1 film, Chris Hemsworth and Daniel Bruhl. He's done a real mix, and he is a very talented director. Obviously, Apollo 13 is a classic film, and yeah, as a lot of people are saying, he is a safe pair of hands. It was a good choice for a replacement. So yes, yeah, but the reports are that due to Lucasfilm being unhappy with how much Lord and Miller had filmed, and to get his own credit for being a director, because apparently you have to direct a certain amount of a film to get the directorial credit. So apparently there's reports are saying that Ron Howard filmed between 70 and 80% reshot footage for this film.
Right.
So that's quite a considerable investment for reshoots. Reshooting 70% of your film. And in terms of the casting, Lord and Miller are responsible for all the casting. The only casting change with the reshoots was the villain. Paul Bettany took over from Michael K. Williams because he wasn't available for reshoots. But Lord and Miller are responsible for casting the role of Han Solo, which is a very daunting task. And I think that's the main difference between this and Rogue One, because Rogue One, bar that an extended cameo from Darth Vader and a CGI Peter Cushing was dealing with new characters that you weren't familiar with, whereas this is touching on holy ground with an established character played perfectly by Harrison Ford that everyone loves. And that's the question is how do you replace Harrison Ford? And they essentially you go on.
No, just and should they? Can they? Was there that was kind of the feeling. I think that's what you and I discussed before this film got anywhere near coming out. We were like, is there really a need for this? But
Well, it's the same as Indiana Jones, which they are talking. They're going to do another one with Harrison Ford, but it's such an established role. It's so linked to the actor, it's hard to imagine anyone else doing it. And they auditioned thousands of people, I think, for this, and then they've ended up with this relatively unknown actor, Alden Ehrenreich. And I think it's safe to say that I think he does, quite a decent job, a decent attempt at the role. I think he's got charm, he's got charisma, and he's not overtly trying to do an impression of Harrison Ford.
Yeah, and I think I had no problem with him. I think he's a good actor. I think he had the grin down, and
he's not tall enough, but I'll allow that.
Yeah, that is an issue. I thought when I saw that was kind of brought into limelight when he stands next to Chewbacca. You're just like, wait a minute, is he still got a growth spurt coming later on? I don't know.
Maybe they should have made Chewbacca smaller. It's all about perspective.
These two midgets turn up, midget Han and midget Chewie. No one will tell the difference.
So should we jump into our review?
Yeah, go for it. You take us away.
I've just sort of split my notes out into what I liked and what I didn't like. I think, yeah, you and I were both going in with well, reasonably sort of low expectations, and it was getting positive reviews. So I went in sort of, so with moderate to sort of, middling, to high expectations. I was in a very barely filled screening, in a very empty screening, which was quite shocking considering it was the Monday after release and it had been a terrible day weather-wise in London, had been chucking it down, so you couldn't even use the excuse of, oh, it was really hot weather, that's why nobody's in. So there was about 20 people in my showing. And yeah, I thought Alden Ehrenreich was good. I thought the casting, was really good on a whole. I think Donald Glover as Lando was brilliant. I wanted to see more of him. I think it had the look and the sound of it. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you'll agree. Star Wars, the sound effects are iconic, and it had, as with any Star Wars film, had great sound design.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's all done with that Star Wars theme playing through, and it's amazing what just playing that theme can do to an action sequence.
Yeah, I mean, but it's funny though, because I thought, in retrospect, one of the weak points of Rogue One was the score. I thought the score was pretty bland and pretty ill-fitting with it, and I think the score in that aspect was a casualty of the reshoots on that film. They had to change the composer on it. I think it was Michael Giacchino. Giacchino, who's a very beloved, famous composer, does a lot of the Disney Pixar films, and he did the Star Trek films as well. So I think he's a popular, sort of a favorite collaborator of J.J. Abrams. But I just thought, his score on Rogue One was really flat. But yeah, this one has got, great score. Really like the cinematography. They're going for a Western feel. All the locations, like a lot of the new Star Wars, there wasn't too much of a reliance on CGI backgrounds, which I thought was nice.
Yeah, that did look good, and I thought the costumes were great, and the fact that they embellished that reputation of Lando with his capes. He hasn't just got one cape; he's got a room full of capes.
Yeah, I did like this sort of the feeling they gave that Lando was a bit of a sex pest. He had his it was basically the Millennium Falcon is his love ship.
Yeah. So, and it does look shiny and new, but I mean, you've probably seen all of this in the trailer, so we're not really spoiling anything. But there are some good comedy moments throughout the film. I think there's some good beats, there's some good jokes.
Yes, yeah, there are some good laugh out loud moments. There's some good banter, as you would hope, between Han and Chewie, and a little bit of nice bickering banter between Han and Lando. Again, I think that's something they could have done more of. I think they could have really played up that relationship a bit more, but whether that is something they're potentially holding back for sequels to this, and I think that's what I was a bit surprised at, because I was assuming this was going to be like Rogue One, and was going to be a one and out, because there's only so much Han Solo story you can tell before you get into you catch up with A New Hope. So, but it seems like between the lines that they're talking, if this film does well, and at this current stage, it's not, but there's a potential for it to be sequels.
I think there's going to be a lot of rethinking, but just before we moved on to the cons, I mean, my one pro I would say about this film, and this is what Ron Howard has brought to it, is that he continues to get relationships right. We've seen it in all of his films. He's very good. And that's one thing that stood out in this film, is you learn more about the relationship between Han and Chewie than anything else, even if the actors don't necessarily pull off the relationships. He gets most of them right. I don't know what your feelings are about that.
Yeah, I mean, he's I think Ron Howard is very much a people's director. He is very good with his cast, and yeah, you're right. He gets very good sort of performances out of people on the most part. I would say, yeah, some better than others. I mean, I think it's just down to I would say, yeah, the in terms of Ulnarenreich, you get some good performances, the right amount of swagger and charm there. I think Donald Glover is a very talented person. I mean, he's an actor, a comedian, and a rapper. The man has endless talents. But I'd say the weak links cast wise, and I suppose we're moving on to what we didn't like about it is I thought Emilia Clarke, so who plays the love interest, she's Khaleesi from Game of Thrones. I think she's pretty bland. I mean, this is the second film role I've seen her in. She was in the last Terminator film that we shouldn't really speak of, but she's awful in that, and she's pretty bland in this. I think it could have done with a stronger actress with a stronger personality in this, especially of what the roles required to be a little bit of a love interest, a little bit of an antagonist to Solo as well.
Well, I kind of, because I felt that generally about a few of the roles. I was like saying, I think Howard gets the idea of the relationships right, and it worked with Han and Chewie because it was all Alden Ehrenreich doing the work and Chewie making noises. So you're like, oh yeah, and it was well written, but he was relying on the actors a lot, and I think he was let down by Clarke because she was this multi-layered character who was a love interest, and then she becomes a more integral part of the plot, which we won't go into. And then there's obviously Paul Bettany and his role and how his develops, and then you could talk about Woody Harrelson and even Thandie Newton, who's barely in it, and I think that shows that maybe Ron Howard was running about trying to hold the whole thing together, that he maybe didn't have the the time left to focus on getting the most out of the actors. So yeah, and that I think that you're always comparing this to Rogue One, aren't you?
Yeah, for good or bad reasons. And I say, I think that's the issues that you're trying to fill in the gaps of the story that people already know, like people that in terms of who Han Solo is. Why did Han Solo become Han Solo? And I mean, sometimes it goes a bit too far about saying like where he got his name from and things like that.
Where he got his gun. How
yes.
he got I felt all of those fan service things were because I went in very positive. As I said, beginning when I heard about this film being made, I was angry. Then I went in positive, hoping for the best, and I came out making excuses for Ron Howard, making excuses for the cast, and seeing a lot of missed opportunities. And the checklist for the fanboys just became annoying, especially those fucking dice. Now that I know why they were inserted into The Last Jedi, where they made no sense, and now you realize that it was all just this blatant attempt to Marvel, do try and create an extended universe, and it was just so obvious, so haphazard, or whatever you call it,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the issues that there seems to be. I don't know whether this is a casualty of what happened with the directors, but it feels the start of the film feels very rushed. It feels like it's in a real rush to get him in, doing the heist sort of smuggler type sort of dodgy dealings. Practically within 20 minutes, he's got the name, he's got the gun, he's got Chewbacca. And he's already on a mission. And it's like, I would have liked to have seen more growth in the character rather than him sort of practically turning up fully formed. It's some of the really interesting bits is it shows the Imperial army at war with a random nation. It's very sort of World War One trench warfare, and that's literally about five minutes. And it would be interesting to see, if because Han Solo is such a good pilot and such a good marksman, where did he learn these skills from? how did he become such a good pilot? It just seems like, he's just naturally talented.
No, I wanted that as well. I think that when I mentioned like the missed opportunities, I think looking at this film that I would have loved to have seen him go in completely green and be a really positive, hey, everything's going to be all right, wisecracking, hey, there's nothing to worry about. And I was hoping in this film he was going to go through some real tragedy, be double-crossed, and that was going to turn him into...
Be bullied.
Yeah, but I mean, we don't want to spoil it too much, but I think the...
Yeah, I mean... I think that's it. It's just, we don't want to go into it too much, but I think that was the thing for me. There wasn't much of considering this was his film, there wasn't much of a character arc for him.
Yeah, he came a bit too fully formed. And there was that, I didn't think the droid worked very well. The Lando ticks a lot of boxes for stuff that's currently trending. Do you know what I mean? But
yeah, exactly. And I think again, comparing it to Rogue One, it's just very familiar. Rogue One had was it K2SO, brilliantly played by.
It was amazing.
Yeah, he was hilarious. It was very sarcastic and droll, and it's just repetition having a sassy droid sidekick. And in Rogue One, they played it very well. That you actually invested in the character, and you were gutted when that droid gets killed. You don't really care about
sacrifices himself.
Yeah, you don't care about the droid in this. But overall, I mean, I think we're being quite overly harsh on it. I mean, I'd still say in sort of the 5-star rate system, I would say it's a low 3 for me. It had entertaining parts, it had funny parts. It just could have been so much more.
Absolutely. I'd feel bad giving it 2 stars. It was quite meh, but it's a solid. I'd say it gets its 3. It's not as good as Rogue One, and that's kind of how you compare it. But it's a decent enough, entertaining romp. The train sequence in the middle is good. It's worth a viewing. And as Ron Howard said, please go and see this film.
Please. It'll be interesting to see, as you say, how it affects future spin-offs, because it's performed so badly. I mean, I think obviously it hasn't helped. They've invested so much money with the reshoots, so they're having to recoup a lot of money back. But they have already announced there's James Mangold, who gave us the amazing Logan film, the Wolverine film last year. He is writing and directing the Boba Fett film, so that could be really interesting. I think he's a really interesting choice, again, if they want to give it a bit of a Western vibe. And there's also, I think it hasn't been announced, but it's been heavily rumored that there's going to be an Obi-Wan Kenobi spin-off, and hopefully we can get Ewan McGregor back. And there's some really interesting stories that I can focus on his sort of wilderness years in Tatooine between sort of episodes 3 and 4. I think the machine's going to keep pumping them out, but I think they'll just be hopefully a little bit more careful with their choice of directors, or maybe even just giving their directors a little bit more breathing space.
It will be interesting, whichever is the next project. I guess it's the next chapter in Star Wars. Is that coming out this Christmas, or is it next Christmas?
Next Christmas, yeah. So 2019. I don't think they've even started filming that yet.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to our next, the next film that we're taking a look at, Deadpool 2.
And last but not least,
Peter.
Any power you want to tell us about?
I don't have one. I just saw the ad.
You're in. Hit it!
So probably the best way to give a quick synopsis on this is, the second entry into Deadpool. It's him assembling a team. It's connected obviously to the X-Men side of things. It's basically about a teenage outcast that he's sort of saddled up with at the beginning and him trying to protect him. But if that sounds a bit muddled, as funny as this film is, I think it does suffer from the rules that it's kind of set for itself. Would you not agree with that, George?
Yeah, so obviously Deadpool 1 was a surprise success. It had been in development hell for about 10 years, and it was a low budget gamble from Fox. I think it was about 70-80 million budget, compared to Solo, which I think for all intents was around 250 million. So yeah, it was a huge success. It was the most successful R-rated film of all time. It was very funny, brilliant casting. Ryan Reynolds is perfect choice for it. But that first film, yeah, was quite a mess. It was very funny, but the tonally and the plot is all over the place. But it sort of kind of got by because it was so funny and it's a bit like the film series shares a lot with Kick-Ass in a way that it was so refreshing and so different from the rest of the superhero genre. I think people just were so surprised they fell in love with it. But yeah, you're right. This time around, it is a classic case of a sequel of let's make it bigger, better,
More characters.
and it kind more characters. I mean, it's still a lot of fun. It's still very funny. There's some great action sequences. So the main change this time around, so it's most of the same people are back, but the original director Tim Miller again left over creative differences before production began. But they brought in a very wise choice. They got in one of the directors of John Wick, David Leitch. So yeah, I think that really works for the upped action scenes. But yeah, I say it's more of the same for both the good and the bad.
Yeah, but I think what I meant is the whole fact that it's always constantly breaking the fourth wall. But I mean, that's part of his shtick. It's he can't. He's not going. It's not going to be a typical hero movie, but in many ways, it ends up being one anyway. So,
Yeah. I think that's the problem with this one. Is it's trying to. I think one of its flaws is it's trying to. By trying to be bigger and trying to be bolder, it's trying to add more depth to the character. And I don't think Deadpool as a character or as a franchise really needs to have depth. Its main drive is the comedy. But I suppose, again, like Kick-Ass, there's only... You need to keep it fresh and it needs to be surprising, whereas it's not as shocking as the first because you've already seen it already.
Yeah, but then there's obviously the marketing overload where he was everywhere and everything. They did the funny thing with our nearest and dearest Celine. She did that great music video and she did a song for it. It's like every big film needs a big song like that. So, but it was like he was everywhere. You could not avoid. The marketing was almost a little bit too much.
Yes, it was very clever, but almost too clever. Yeah, as you say, it was everywhere and across everything. Like even as far as in America, I don't think they did it over here, but they every Fox film they released like Deadpool covers for every Fox film. So basically, Deadpool had inserted himself into loads of different films' DVD covers.
I'd seen that,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, there's still a lot of fun. I say it's very funny. It's got the new cast members. So there's Domino, whose superpower is luck. She's played by Daisy Beats, I think is her name. I think she's really good. I'd like to see more of her. And you've got man of the moment, Josh Brolin, playing the sort of the antagonist Cable. Obviously not as a blinding performance as his turn in Avengers as Thanos, but still, a gruff character, and he's a lot of fun.
I liked him in this. I thought it was good to see him kind of looking like normal Josh Brolin with his normal kind of voice and without the sort of fantasy side of Marvel. It was nice. I mean, I know obviously this is still fantasy, but it was a bit more grounded. And so, yeah, I did. I thought he was good in it, and almost. I think you mentioned this to me. Felt like they could have had more of him.
Yeah, definitely. I did think similar to Solo. I think they could have done more with. He could have been in it more, but it is ultimately it is Deadpool's movie. It is Ryan Reynolds' film. But yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had. I mean, I'm not spoiling anything, but stay for the end credit sequence because they're some of the funniest parts of the film.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, are we being too harsh on this? In terms of what should we be expecting from Deadpool films? And what does this mean for X-Men in general? Because I know there's another X-Men sort of 2.0 coming out, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a little bit up in the air. There's another sort of the last of the young X-Men, the first class group. There's Dark Phoenix is coming out next year. That's been delayed by reshoots and script problems apparently. And the whole X-Men franchise is a little bit up in the air because X-Men is owned by 20th Century Fox, and they are currently in a merger slash union slash takeover by Disney. So yeah, who knows what could be on the horizon? But I think Deadpool is so successful and profitable, I wouldn't be surprised if they keep him on in some capacity. And because of the character's fourth wall breaking, you could easily have him turn up with a completely brand new, and you've recast the whole X-Men and rebooted the whole X-Men, and you could keep Deadpool as Ryan Reynolds, and I don't think anyone would really care or mind. If anything, it would be perfect.
Yeah, I think that would work well. But no, I mean, I enjoyed it. There's some great gags in it, and it's yeah, it doesn't have the shock, surprise, and originality of the first, but on a sliding scale, went and saw Infinity War, and was like so satisfied. That was brilliant. Went and saw Deadpool, was satisfied, just slightly less so. And then you get to watch Solo, and just very meh. Too many films in the same month.
Yeah, and I think that is another reason why Solo hasn't performed so well. Is just the fact it's too crowded a marketplace. Yeah, obviously in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in France, Charlie, that the weather has been unreasonably kind to us this time of year. It's been really good weather, and as a result, people, avoid sitting in a dark, cold room when they'd rather be enjoying sunshine.
So what else have we got to look forward to coming out of the summer? I know there's one film that you and I are both looking forward to, which is the next installment in the Mission Impossible franchise. What's it called?
Fallout, Mission Impossible Fallout. So yeah, I think this is my sort of, after Avengers is my most anticipated blockbuster of the year. I really enjoyed. Well, you and I have been big fans of the Mission Impossible franchise, all of them, even Mission Impossible 2.
From the get-go,
and these films have, the last few have had a bit of a renaissance and have really challenged, the sort of Bond stakes and Bourne in terms of being, a real great, really strong spy action flicks. And so yeah, this is directed again by, I've completely forgotten his name. It is.
We saw him at the. It was Muck. We saw him at the Empire show.
Christopher McQuarrie. Yeah, so it's directed by Christopher McQuarrie, who is a frequent collaborator with Tom Cruise. So he wrote and directed the first Jack Reacher film. He did rewrites on Edge of Tomorrow. And he wrote and directed the last Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation. So yeah, I think it's even though the Mission Impossible films until now have had sort of almost guest directors, it's been a different director every time. I think he did such a good job on Rogue Nation. I'm happy to see what he's got to offer again. And if the trailer's anything to go by, it looks like there's going to be some amazing stunts, some real spectacle, and some great casting to see the dashingly handsome Henry Cavill with an amazing mustache played up as the villain from the looks of it. Anyway.
Yeah, is he a villain? Or is he? We won't know. But no, I mean, checking out the Halo jump, because we thought that Pierce Brosnan was the first person to ever do a Halo jump. It turns out that might not be true, and Tom Cruise has done it for real, hasn't he?
Well, Pierce might have offered to do it for real, but he's obviously just too good looking.
Yeah, it's but no, very, very excited to see that. And then there's also what else have we got coming out, George? I'm just trying to think.
So we've got I'd say the other film, and it's sort of another tenuous link to Mission Impossible, is Incredibles 2 by Brad Bird, who did Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol. So yeah, again, you and I, because it's that whole sort of spy / superhero feel, we both loved the first Incredibles film, and it's quite a belated sequel, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's probably I'd say it's at my top three. Like I think it's at shock horror. I think it's better than all of the Toy Stories. Personally, I loved the first film. For me, it's got everything, but I suppose it was kind of directed towards the type of films I like. But it was so
Yeah.
good. You know, so many funny things in it.
Yeah, no, it's I mean it is I'd say it's arguably I think a lot of people forget about it when they're talking about superhero films, but I'd say it's one of the best films in the superhero genre. I mean, I know sort of Pixar have their own little sort of niche genre, but yeah, really excited about that. I mean, to a less extent, I think we've got Jurassic World 2, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is out next week. In the UK, we're getting it before the States do, but currently no sort of reviews are out yet. The marketing is fairly atrocious. There's some really cringeworthy Odeon ads with Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard introducing the film and trying to be funny. The trailers show the entire plot, but who knows? It may be.
I did. I didn't enjoy the first one. Sorry, the what was it? Jurassic World. I was just expecting a bigger bad. That's how the marketing of that made you expect that you were going to get to see something you'd never seen before. And I thought it was that whichever the sea dinosaur is. I can't remember the exact name for it. But when you kept seeing that, I said, oh, maybe it's going to be amphibious. It's going to be in the water. It's going to be able to fly. It's going to be something you've never ever seen. And it wasn't. It was. You know, I think that was bad marketing. And Chris Pratt playing a very similar character to Star-Lord. So I don't know. You enjoyed it though. You enjoyed the first one.
Yeah, I went into it with. I mean, I think it was one of the first outings to the cinema I had after my daughter was born, and it ticked all the boxes for me in terms of classic popcorn entertainment. I was thrilled. I laughed. But then, you know, in typical sort of popcorn junk food fashion, as soon as, you know, shortly afterwards, a bit like, you know, devouring a McDonald's, I instantly regretted it. It was sort of like, oh yeah, that film just fell apart. Like the plot made no sense and things like that. But yeah, I think from a sort of an action spectacle, and it had some nice nods to the original Jurassic Park, which we're going to talk about in our next Retro Ramble episode. But yeah, I know. Who knows? It could go either way. It's an interesting choice of director. He's more of a horror themed director. I think it's J. Antonio. He's a Spanish director.
Well, that's maybe what it needs. A scary version.
Yeah. So we'll see. But yeah, I think the main two that I think we're on the same page, that it's Mission Impossible, Fallout, and Incredibles 2 are the big two for the summer that we're looking forward to.
I'm just trying to work out, is Mission Impossible Fallout going to be about nuclear fallout, or is it going to be about the group falling out? You know, is there just going to be a big fight? I'm not talking to him. I hate him.
I think it has many meanings.
Right, it's a double meaning. Okay, so as George mentioned there, in our next back to the regular show, Retro Ramble, we will be reviewing the original Jurassic Park. So stay tuned for that. George, anything else you want to mention before we sign off?
No, I'm just a warning ahead of time. I'm sure the Jurassic Park episode will have lots of bad Jeff Goldblum impressions, but those can't be avoided.
We love the guy. It's understandable.
Indeed is. No, that's all it is. But yeah, as always, check us out on. We're on, as we said, retroramble.blog. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And yeah, let us know your thoughts on Solo, on Deadpool. You know, were we right? Were we wrong? And yeah, let us know.
And to quote Peter Kay, to get us coming in your ears, you just need to check us out on Spotify, we're on Libsyn, and we're now also on Stitcher. So you can get covered in all of our episodes. So without further banter from us, I've been Charlie McGee.
I've been George McGee.
And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.